Hey everybody, yesterday we saw Knock at the Cabin, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie. We're a couple weeks late, but we thought it was a can't miss theatrical event. So we watched Knock at the Cabin. Aiden, what's the plot at Knock at the Cabin?
A couple and their daughter are at a cabin in the woods as a getaway, and four strangers show up and say, one of you needs to be sacrificed to stop the end of the world. And they have a tense weekend at the cabin, to say the least. Connor, what'd you think of Knock at the Cabin?
The Knock at the Cabin was pretty good, which is surprising because I typically don't like M. Night Shyamalan. I haven't seen The Sixth Sense, which is told to be his classic movie. The only M. Night movie I've watched that I really slightly liked was Shatter, and even that was kind of lame. But I was like, I guess it's not terrible. But Knock at the Cabin was genuinely good, surprisingly. All of the acting was surprisingly decent for an M. Night Shyamalan. There's still the moments, because M. Night Shyamalan doesn't know how to direct actors or pick their best takes, or request more takes when it's a little stilted. But it shows the acting was genuinely pretty good, because in spite of M. Night Shyamalan, most of it actually kind of worked. Aside from a couple moments. Both the spoiler alert. So basically, the four people that show up are representative of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and this couple, Eric and Andy, and their daughter need to decide one of them to be killed by another to stop catastrophic events that are happening. Airplanes are falling out of the sky, and there's tsunamis, and lightning is causing the earth to set on fire, so all sorts of people are dying. And it's a lot about the relationship between Andy, Eric, and their daughter, and that's a pretty good story that delves in more with flashbacks, kind of establishing this couple, which makes it sadder when ultimately they have to choose who dies to save the world. But the ending is kind of bittersweet when that goes down. And the first half of it, or the first 3/4 of it really, until the third act, is them kind of trying to figure out if these people are prejudiced against them for being gay because Ron Weasley beat them up at a bar one time, so they didn't know if Ron Weasley just happened to be brought there due to the events of the Four Horsemen's visions, or if it was kind of a hate crime type thing where he tricked these other people who were seemingly wholesome individuals into trying to kill them, or trying to get them to kill each other. So there's a lot of like questioning on what's going on, and it's kind of a suspense thriller. It's not really a horror movie, which you might expect from the marketing materials, which make it look like a horror home invasion movie, but that's not really what it is. It's just a couple grappling with philosophy and trying to figure out how to, if the world is ending and whether or not, and then when they come to the conclusion it is, how they're going to save it. And it's a very interesting movie. Like I said, everyone gives pretty good performances. There are still a couple awkward line reads in there, which is to be expected. Dave Bautista specifically, I mean, everyone's really good, and Dave Bautista's on par.
Yeah.
But I was especially impressed with him because a lot of the wrestlers,
The wrestler
actors are hit or miss.
I mean, The Rock is the most one-note man alive, and
The Rock is very one-note and seemingly doesn't really care about anything but a paycheck anymore. And John Cena wants to be an actor, but also is one-note in the way that no matter who he plays, he's always just John Cena,
Yeah.
the freakishly ripped guy.
Yeah.
And Dave Bautista was trying to show some of his range here, and actually seemingly put a lot into this performance.
Yeah.
I
Surprising amount of range for a wrestler actor.
Right. I don't think he's the best actor in the movie. He still probably slants towards the lower half of the cast. But considering he was kind of typecast as Drax or the henchman for villains, this was a role that showed surprising range for him. And it seemed like he was actually gave a shit and didn't just want a massive paycheck like The Rock does. Like, The Rock's a fine actor, but he only plays one character because that's what people want, and they pay him a lot of money to be that character over and over again because it sells.
Yep.
And Dave Bautista actually seems to want to do something artistic with this movie, and based on interviews and stuff, that seems like something he genuinely is interested in, expanding his range as an actor and trying to break out of the Marvel typecast and the henchman of James Bond's typecast, and try to play a character that has deeper themes and more emotional depth than something The Rock or John Cena might play, which I thought was pretty cool. And he did a pretty decent job. He was keeping up with the rest of the cast, which I thought was all pretty good for the most part. And like I said, even with stilted M. Night Shyamalan, poor actor directing that you would expect from Shyamalan, kind of in spite of Shyamalan, all the players in this movie actually brought really good performances.
Mm-hmm.
Because you look at something like The Happening, which I watched like 6 months ago,
Yeah.
and that movie is a bunch of actors who don't care about the material and are trying to do it for a paycheck, and M. Night Shyamalan, who can't direct actors, which is a deadly combination. Here it seems like everybody's actually kind of passionate about the story they're trying to tell, and it comes off in the effort on screen because there's genuinely really good performances throughout in spite of Shyamalan. It's pretty well shot too, even though it is a fairly short movie. It's 100 minutes, so an hour 40.
Yeah.
And even being kind of a bottle movie, mostly taking place at the titular cabin, it actually moves at a pretty good pace. It never gets bogged down or boring. Like, this movie, I think, stays the right amount of time. If it was any longer, I think it would start to be boring. And if it was any shorter, it would feel a tad undercooked. But I think in the editing room, they managed to find the right balance to actually make it an incredibly well-paced movie for what it is.
Yep.
Because when I looked at the 100 minutes, I was like, oof, that's a little long for a bottle movie in the woods. But overall, I think, and I watched like old and stuff, and Shyamalan, I think, is trying to go with more humanistic stories lately. I thought old was shit still.
Old's fucking awful.
Or old is still pretty bad, falling into a lot of the M. Night traps and maybe being a little too high concept. But this is a very humanistic story where the cast was very passionate about it, M. Night seemed passionate about it, and the team surrounding him, like the sound editors, did an amazing job. The editors did an amazing job, and it actually comes together to be a really decent product. So Aiden, what did you think of Knock at the Cabin?
It's good. It's really good. I'm glad M. Night is not writing his own scripts anymore, or at least he's adapting them from other works, since it seems to give M. Night an easier time, even if Old was still a mess. But this being adapted from a book was probably a good thing for it. I think it's a really interesting premise. I like the twist on the home invasion genre. I remember back when home invasion movies came back into style like 15 years ago. Like The Purge, and there's like a bunch of others that came out around that time. No, this is a really unique twist on it where nobody wants to be there, including the invaders. And you have kind of just this weird situation where 4 strangers have to try to connect to 3 people to convince them to kill themselves. Which is, you know, it's very weird, and you know, they get a lot of mileage out of that, a lot of emotional situations and scenes. Everyone's really good in this movie for the most part, and there's a little bit of Shyamalan jank here and there from random people.
Right.
Bautista has really good range, and he's pretty good in this. He's especially impressive being the wrestler actor, as we mentioned before. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add from you. It's a nice, relatively simple movie with an interesting concept.
Right.
That goes back and forth on how much you and the characters trust the weird people who broke into their cabin, and it's very well shot. Shyamalan's kind of had a rocky history with shooting too, but this is a pretty good looking movie. It's simple, but it does everything it needs to do when it needs to do it. Really interesting story. I kind of thought that the ending was going to go the other way, and it kind of felt like it was set up to go the other way, so I don't know if something happened, like they thought some kind of ending where the apocalypse happens would be too dour, because there's like the constant references to like together forever until the end, whatever.
Right. Well, Eric throughout, you can see him kind of grappling with it more, and kind of also taking it better than Andrew did.
Yeah.
So ultimately, spoiler at the end when Eric dies, and is kind of at peace with his decision. I thought that was a pretty good moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good moment. I'm not dissatisfied with the ending. I just kind of thought it was gonna lean the other way, and I think it would have been kind of interesting to just have the world end in a movie like this. But I guess, you know, as I understand, the book ends with the apocalypse actually happening, but I don't think you could pull that off in Hollywood. They had to have the nice Hollywood moment where all the planes start flying again and all the people get saved from the flood. But I don't have any issues with the ending. It's still pretty impactful and comes up nicely from everything else that's going on.
Right. Well, even if that was like a Hollywood sanction, they actually handled that pretty well.
Yeah, it's definitely handled the best you could possibly
Eric
handle that
has a magic
situation.
vision of his daughter in the future, and he wants her to live a better life, so he decides not to be selfish and ultimately sacrifice himself.
Oh shit.
I also like how the 4 horsemen all thought none of them necessarily wanted them to do it, but they understood that that's what had to happen, and they all had big stakes. Dave Bautista was a gym teacher and a basketball coach or something like that, and he loves kids. And then the diner lady had a kid, and
The other woman was a nurse.
Is caring for people because she's a nurse. And then Ron Weasley was just kind of a dick, but was like, we should probably end the apocalypse anyhow.
Well, he was trying to reform himself, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, nice, simple movie. Really interesting premise, well acted. I dug it. Connor, would you recommend Knock at the Cabin?
Yes, I would. I thought it was pretty good. It's a fun twist on the home, maybe not fun, but it's a good twist on the home invasion franchise. Like I said, it's a very well-paced movie. The acting was surprisingly clean considering it was Shyamalan. And though there are some moments of jank, if I'm being totally honest, it was probably Shyamalan's best movie I've seen. I haven't seen The Sixth Sense. I've heard that one's pretty good, but who knows. But as of now, this is my favorite Shyamalan movie. It was actually a surprisingly good movie, despite what you would assume based on the director in charge. So Aiden, what would you recommend Knock at the Cabin?
Yep, easy recommend. Yeah, it's good.